Starbound Princess.
The station drifted in orbit like it had forgotten why it was built in the first place. Ships came and went in slow, patient lines, their engines glowing faintly against the endless curve of the gas giant below, a swirling ocean of storms that never calmed. Cade had been watching that storm for the last 3 hours, mostly because it was more reliable than the departure board behind him. The board changed its mind every 10 minutes. The storm did not. Delayed, Cade muttered under his breath again, as if saying it differently might convince the universe to get creative for once. It didn't. He leaned back in his seat, boots crossed, arms folded, trying to look like a man who had important places to be, instead of a man who had been stuck in Terminal Ring C long enough to memorize the cleaning drone's patrol pattern. The drone passed again, humming softly, pausing at a stain that had outlived several civilizations, then giving up with quiet dignity. "Same, my friend," Cade whispered to it. Around him, the station lived its usual restless life. Merchants argued with glowing kiosks that refused refunds with cheerful politeness. Pilots paced like caged animals. A family of 6 debated loudly over whether space travel had gotten worse or if they had simply gotten older. Cade suspected it was both. He shifted in his seat and reached into his bag, pulling out a sealed ration pack. He turned it over in his hands, reading the label like it might reveal hidden secrets this time. "Nutrient Brick, Flavor Variant 7, he read quietly. "That sounds promising. Last time Variant 6 tried to kill me emotionally." He didn't open it, not yet. That was emergency food. And in Cade's experience, emergencies tended to wait until you were just comfortable enough to believe they wouldn't happen. His gaze drifted again, not really looking for anything in particular, just following movement the way tired minds do. That was when he noticed her. At first, she didn't stand out. The station was full of people sitting alone, pretending not to be alone. But there was something about the stillness. Tucked into the corner between a flickering vending unit and a wide observation window sat a small figure, motionless in a way that felt intentional. A child. Cade frowned slightly, adjusting his posture. Children didn't sit like that. They fidgeted. They complained. They made loud declarations about being bored and then immediately rejected every solution offered to them. This one didn't move at all. She simply watched. He squinted a little, leaning forward just enough to get a better look without making it obvious he was looking. The girl looked almost human. Same proportions, same quiet presence. But there was no mistaking the difference. Her ears were long, gently pointed, extending back with a natural elegance that made them seem less like an oddity and more like a design choice the universe had gotten right. "Well," Cade murmured, "that's new." He glanced around her. No luggage, no guardians, no frantic adult searching for a missing child. Just the girl, sitting as if she had chosen that exact spot for a reason no one else understood. Cade leaned back again, folding his arms tighter. "Not my problem," he said softly, with the confidence of someone who absolutely knew it was about to become his problem. He tried to look away. He really did. He even counted passing ships. 1, 2, 3, a cargo hauler that looked like it had survived a small war, 4, but his attention kept drifting back to that corner. The girl hadn't moved, not even once. "That's, unsettling," he admitted quietly. Another minute passed, then 2. Cade let out a slow breath and rubbed his face. "All right," he said to no one in particular. "I'm just going to check, that's all. A quick check. I am not adopting a space child today." He stood, stretching slightly as if this had been his plan all along, and walked over with a casual pace that fooled absolutely no one, especially not himself. As he got closer, he slowed, uncertain how to begin a conversation that did not start with, "Hello, are you mysteriously alone and possibly important?" He stopped a few steps away. The girl looked up at him. Her eyes were calm, not curious, not afraid, just aware, like she had already decided he was safe before he even reached her. "Well," Cade said, clearing his throat, "this is where I usually say something clever, but I'm working with limited material today." No response. She simply watched him. "Good," he nodded. "Strong, silent type. I respect that. Makes this easier for me." He crouched down slightly, keeping a respectful distance. You, waiting for someone? She didn't answer. Right, he sighed softly. Of course you are. Everyone here is waiting for someone, or something, or a refund that will never come. Her gaze didn't waver. Cade hesitated, then reached into his bag again, pulling out the ration pack. He held it up slightly. I've got food, he said. Technically, it's not winning any awards, but it does exist, which is more than I can say for most station promises. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly the girl reached out. Cade blinked. Oh, he said, a little surprised. That was easier than expected. He handed it to her. She opened it with careful precision, as if she had done this many times before, and took a small bite. No reaction, no complaint, no visible disappointment. That's concerning, Cade muttered. You're either very brave or you have no standards. He lowered himself to sit beside her, leaving a small space between them. The station noise continued around them, distant and unimportant now. They sat in silence. After a while, Cade leaned back against the wall and glanced at her. You know, he said quietly, I was planning to complain for at least another hour, but this is surprisingly better. The girl continued eating, calm and composed. Cade exhaled slowly, his eyes drifting back to the swirling storm outside the window. Guess the universe decided I needed company, he murmured. Could have sent someone who talks, though. Just saying. For the first time, the girl's gaze shifted slightly, as if she had heard something worth considering. And for reasons Cade couldn't explain, he smiled. Cade decided, after several minutes of shared silence, that this was now officially the strangest calm he had experienced in a spaceport, which was saying something considering he once spent 12 hours next to a pilot who believed his ship could hear insults. He shifted slightly against the wall, glancing sideways at the girl. She had finished exactly half of the ration pack and stopped, folding the wrapper with quiet precision as if even the packaging deserved respect. Cade watched that with a faint frown. That, he said, pointing at the neatly folded wrapper, is already more discipline than I've shown in my entire career. She didn't respond, but her eyes flicked toward him briefly, acknowledging his existence in the same understated way she had since he arrived. Cade nodded slowly. Right, still not talking. That's fine. Honestly, I do enough talking for both of us. He leaned his head back, letting it rest against the cold surface behind him. The station lights above flickered once, then steadied, as if reconsidering whether chaos was worth the effort today. Somewhere in the distance, a loud argument broke out over docking fees, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone losing that argument. Ah, Cade muttered. Commerce, the oldest battlefield. He glanced again at the girl. Up close, the details became harder to ignore. Her posture remained perfectly straight, not stiff, but controlled, like someone who had been taught that even stillness could communicate something. Her long ears curved back elegantly, catching the light in a way that made them seem almost deliberate, like a signature left by her species. All right, Cade said quietly, tilting his head. I'm going to make a guess, and you can correct me with your continued silence if I'm wrong. You're not from around here. No reaction. Bold claim, I know, he added, really pushing the boundaries of deduction. He reached into his bag again, pulling out a small metal canteen. He took a sip, then hesitated before offering it slightly in her direction. Water, he said. It's actually water. Not recycled twice, not flavored like disappointment. A rare find. The girl looked at the canteen, then at him. There was a pause, long enough that Cade began to reconsider the offer, before she reached out and accepted it. Her movements were slow, deliberate, never rushed. She took a small drink, then handed it back. Efficient, Cade noted. I respect that. Most people would have taken half and then apologized like it was a crime. He wiped the edge out of habit, then took another sip. So, he continued, we've shared food and water. That makes us, what? Acquaintances? Temporary allies? Co-survivors of Terminal Ring C? The girl's gaze shifted slightly toward the large viewport again, where the gas giant churned endlessly below. Cade followed her attention, watching the storms twist in slow, massive spirals. Yeah, he said softly. I get it. Hard to compete with that. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, but it didn't feel empty. It felt stable, like a moment carved out of the constant movement of everything else. Cade scratched the back of his neck, glancing around the station again. Still no sign of anyone searching for her. No frantic announcements, no security sweep, nothing. That's the part I don't like, he admitted under his breath. If you're lost, someone should be looking. And if no one's looking, he paused, then shook his head slightly. Let's not finish that thought. I just ate. He shifted again, pulling one knee up slightly. You know, I once got stuck on a mining outpost for 3 days because someone mislabeled a shipment of bolts as decorative art. Whole station shut down trying to figure out why nothing worked. He glanced at her. This is still weirder. The girl's expression didn't change, but her eyes lingered on him a fraction longer this time, as if she was beginning to catalog his words rather than simply hear them. Cade noticed and raised an eyebrow. Oh, so now you're interested. Good. I was worried I'd have to start telling better stories. A faint flicker, barely there, touched her expression. Not quite a smile, but close enough that Cade almost missed it. He blinked. Wait, he said, leaning forward slightly. Was that? Did you just? The expression was gone. Cade sat back again, exhaling slowly. All right, he nodded. I see how it is. Subtle reactions only. Keeps things mysterious. He rubbed his hands together briefly, then looked at the empty wrapper she had folded. You didn't finish it, he said. No answer. Not hungry? He asked. She shook her head once. A small movement, but clear. Cade tilted his head. Or saving it. She didn't respond, but her eyes shifted slightly downward toward the wrapper, then back up. Saving it, he concluded. Smart. Always plan for later. I usually forget there is a later until it arrives and demands snacks. He leaned back again, letting out a quiet breath. You know, he said, I've had worse company. The girl turned her head slightly, looking at him more directly now. Don't take that the wrong way, he added quickly. That's a compliment, a strong one. A faint hum passed through the station as a large ship outside adjusted its position. The light shifted slightly, casting a soft glow across the floor and the wall behind them. Cade watched the reflection for a moment, then glanced at her again. You've got a name? He asked. Silence. Right, he nodded. Keeping that classified. Fair enough. He crossed his arms loosely, closing his eyes for a brief second before opening them again. I'm Cade, he said, in case you were wondering, which you weren't, but now you know. The girl studied him quietly, her gaze steady. Cade smiled faintly. There, he said. Now this isn't completely one-sided. She shifted slightly, adjusting her position against the wall, closer by just a fraction. Cade didn't comment on it. He just noticed. And for reasons he couldn't explain, that felt like enough. Time in the station did something strange when you stopped fighting it. Cade noticed it somewhere between the hum of passing ships and the soft rhythm of the girl beside him, breathing evenly, like she had decided this corner of the universe was acceptable for now. Minutes stretched without dragging, conversations blurred into background noise, and for once the constant motion around him didn't demand anything. He tapped his fingers lightly against his knee, glancing sideways. She hadn't moved much, but there was a subtle difference now. Not in posture, still precise, still composed, but in presence. Less like she was observing everything from a distance. More like she had allowed herself to exist inside it. Careful, Cade murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. You keep adapting like that, you might accidentally become a regular traveler. Her eyes shifted toward him, calm as ever. Terrifying thought, I know, he added. A group of traders passed by, arguing loudly about docking priorities. One of them waved his arms dramatically, nearly knocking over a hovering service drone, which beeped in mild outrage before drifting away like it had better things to do. Cade watched them go, then leaned slightly closer to the girl. Rule 1 of spaceports, he said quietly. If someone starts shouting, they've already lost. They just haven't accepted it yet. The girl's gaze followed the traders for a moment. Then, in a movement so subtle it almost didn't happen, Her lips parted slightly, and she repeated something under her breath, barely audible. The tone. Not the words, the tone. It was an almost perfect imitation of the trader's exaggerated frustration. Cade froze for half a second, then turned his head slowly toward her. "No," he said, holding back a laugh. "You did not just do that." Her expression returned to neutral immediately, but her eyes flickered with something new, something lighter. "That," Cade whispered, pointing at her like he had just discovered a hidden feature, "was excellent. That was disturbingly accurate." She looked away again, back toward the viewport, as if nothing had happened. "Oh, don't do that," he said. "You can't just drop that level of talent and then pretend you're just sitting here quietly." No response. Cade leaned back, shaking his head with a quiet chuckle. "All right. Silent, observant, and apparently a professional mimic. I'm starting to think I should be taking notes." He stretched his legs out slightly, careful not to invade her space. "You know," he continued, "if you ever decide to start talking, you're going to be very good at it. People love hearing themselves, especially when it sounds like someone else agrees with them." The girl tilted her head just a fraction, as if considering the idea. Cade noticed. "Yeah," he nodded. "Dangerous power. Use responsibly." A cargo shuttle roared softly outside the viewport, its engines casting shifting light across the station interior. The reflection danced across the girl's face, highlighting the smooth lines of her features and the gentle curve of her long ears. For a moment she looked less like a lost child and more like something deliberate, something placed exactly where it needed to be. Cade narrowed his eyes slightly, studying her. "You're very calm," he said. She didn't answer. "No, I mean it," he went on. "Most kids would have tried to run off, or panic, or at least complain about the food." He gestured lightly. "You just sit, watch, adapt. It's impressive. Slightly unsettling, but impressive." Her gaze shifted back to him. "And before you ask," he added, "yes, I am qualified to judge unsettling behavior. I once spent a week on a ship where the navigation system developed a personality. It judged me constantly." For a moment, nothing happened. Then again, that almost smile, barely there. A flicker. Cade caught it this time. "Okay," he said, sitting up a little straighter. "That's 2. I'm counting that as progress." The girl blinked slowly, her expression smoothing out again, but there was no denying it now. Something in her demeanor had changed. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice, but Cade did. "All right," he said, lowering his voice slightly, as if sharing a secret. "Let's try something." He glanced around, then leaned in just a bit. "On a scale from 1 to completely lost, how lost are you?" The girl stared at him. "Good," he nodded. "Very helpful." He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Okay, new question. If someone were looking for you, would they be loud about it or quietly terrifying?" Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Cade's smile faded a little. Not in fear, more in realization. "Quietly terrifying," he murmured. "Yeah, that tracks." He leaned back again, exhaling slowly. "You know," he said, "I had a feeling this was going to turn into something complicated. It always does." The station lights dimmed slightly for a moment, then returned to normal. Somewhere overhead, a new announcement began, but it was quickly drowned out by the general noise of the terminal. Cade glanced at the girl again. She had shifted just a little closer, not enough to be obvious, but enough that their shoulders were now only a small distance apart. He didn't comment on it. Instead, he folded his arms loosely and looked back out at the storm below. "Whatever's going on," he said quietly, "you picked a good spot to wait it out." The girl followed his gaze, the swirling clouds reflected faintly in her eyes. For a while, neither of them spoke, but the silence felt different now. Not empty, not distant, shared. The shift came so quietly that for a moment Cade thought he had imagined it. The station's endless hum, the layered chorus of engines, voices, distant announcements, seemed to tighten, as if something unseen had reached out and turned a dial ever so slightly. Then the lights flickered. Not the casual, tired flicker of overworked systems, but something sharper, intentional. Cade's eyes lifted toward the ceiling. That's new, he muttered. Around them, conversations hesitated. Not stopped. People rarely stopped immediately, but slowed, as if the station itself had taken a breath, and everyone was waiting to see what it would do next. A low tone echoed through the terminal. Not loud, not urgent. Just final. Cade frowned. I don't like tones that don't explain themselves, he said under his breath. That's always how problems start. The girl beside him didn't move. He glanced at her. She was watching the corridor now, her gaze sharper than before, the calm still there, but layered with something else, something alert. Okay, Cade said slowly. You definitely know something I don't, and I'm starting to feel left out. Another tone followed. This one carried words, but they came distorted at first, breaking through static before stabilizing. Attention, the voice announced, smooth and controlled. Transit operations are temporarily suspended. Please remain in your current sector. Cade blinked. Temporarily suspended, he repeated. That's a fancy way of saying nobody's going anywhere. He leaned slightly forward, peering toward the main corridor. People were starting to notice now. The traders had stopped arguing. Even the cleaning drone paused mid-path, as if it too was reconsidering its priorities. Then came the second announcement. Security protocol Theta 7 is now in effect. Cade froze for half a second. Ah, he said quietly. That's not a good number. The girl's posture shifted, just slightly, but it was enough. Cade turned his head toward her. You reacted to that, he said. She didn't answer. But you did, he continued. That was a reaction. I saw it. Her gaze remained fixed ahead. Cade followed it, and that was when he saw them. Drones, not the small, polite service units that apologize when they bumped into you. These were larger, angular, moving with a precision that felt deliberate. They slid into the corridor from multiple directions, their surfaces reflecting the station lights in sharp, controlled lines. People began to step back. No panic yet, just awareness. Cade exhaled slowly. Okay, he murmured. So either someone very important lost something, or someone very important is about to find something. He glanced at the girl again. She was still calm, too calm. You're not surprised, he said quietly. Her eyes flickered toward him for a brief moment. Cade tilted his head. Right, of course you're not. A pair of armored figures entered the far end of the terminal, their presence cutting through the space like a blade. Their armor was unlike anything Cade had seen in this station before. Sleek, dark, marked with symbols that carried weight even if you didn't understand them. People moved aside instinctively. No one told them to. They just did. Cade let out a slow breath. That, he said, is what I like to call quietly terrifying. The girl's gaze shifted slightly, following the guards. Cade noticed. You recognize them. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Cade leaned back against the wall again, though his posture had changed. Less relaxed now, more aware. All right, he said softly. Let's review the situation. Station lockdown, high-level security, mysterious child who doesn't panic and imitates people for fun. He paused. I'm starting to think this is not a coincidence. The girl turned her head slightly toward him. Cade raised an eyebrow. Feel free to jump in at any point, he said. Clarifications are welcome. Silence. Right, he nodded. Still not talking. One of the drones passed closer now, scanning the area with a soft, steady light. Cade watched it carefully, trying not to look like someone who suddenly felt very visible. Okay, he whispered, leaning slightly toward the girl. Hypothetically speaking, if someone important was missing, and they happened to be sitting right here, he gestured subtly between them. Would now be a good time to mention that? The girl didn't move, but she leaned closer, just a fraction. Cade stopped talking. For a moment, the noise of the station seemed to fade again, replaced by that same strange stillness from before. But now it carried tension beneath it, like a quiet surface over something much larger. Cade swallowed once, then let out a quiet breath. I'm going to interpret that as a no, he said. Another group of guards moved through the terminal, their steps synchronized, their presence unmistakable. The symbols on their armor caught the light again, and this time Cade recognized the pattern. Not from experience, from stories. The kind of stories people told quietly, like they weren't sure they were supposed to know them. Cade's eyes widened slightly. "Oh," he said under his breath. "Oh, that's very important." He turned his head slowly toward the girl. She was already looking at him, calm, composed, completely unafraid. Cade let out a quiet, almost amused breath despite himself. "You've got to be kidding me," he murmured. The girl blinked once, and for the first time since he had met her, she spoke, softly, clearly, her voice calm in a way that didn't belong to a child lost in a crowded station. "Stay," she said. Cade stared at her. Then he nodded once. "All right," he said. The word stayed in the air longer than it should have. "Stay." Cade blinked once, then twice, as if the station lighting might rearrange reality if he gave it enough time. It didn't. The girl sat exactly where she had been, calm, composed, her gaze steady, as if she had not just delivered the most confident one-word command he had ever heard from someone who had spent the last hour not speaking at all. "Well," Cade said slowly, exhaling through his nose, "that narrows things down considerably." He leaned back against the wall again, though this time it felt less like resting and more like anchoring himself to something stable. "You know," he added, glancing sideways at her, "most people ease into conversation. Maybe start with a greeting. You went straight for authority. I respect that." She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. The station around them shifted further into controlled tension. The drones moved with greater purpose now, their scanning beams sweeping across travelers who suddenly found very interesting reasons to stand still. The guards spread out in calculated patterns, their formations subtle but unmistakable. Cade watched one of the drones glide past, its sensors pausing briefly on a group of merchants before moving on. "All right," he murmured. "We're definitely past lost luggage territory." He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "This feels more like someone important misplaced something even more important." His eyes flicked back to the girl. She was watching the guards again. No fear, no urgency, just awareness. Cade let out a quiet breath. "And you told me to stay," he said, "which suggests that leaving would be, what, impolite, dangerous, dramatically inappropriate?" She tilted her head slightly, as if considering his phrasing. "Good," Cade nodded. "Glad we're on the same page." A sudden movement at the far end of the terminal drew his attention. A cluster of guards had stopped, forming a tighter perimeter around something Cade couldn't quite see. The surrounding crowd shifted subtly, people stepping back, voices lowering. Cade leaned forward slightly, trying to get a better angle. "That's never a good sign," he muttered. "When trained professionals start standing closer together, it usually means they've found something. Or they're about to." The girl's gaze followed the same direction. Cade noticed that. "Okay," he said quietly. "You're definitely tracking this." He hesitated for a moment, then leaned a little closer, lowering his voice. "Hypothetically, and I stress hypothetically, if all of this is connected to you, you're handling it with an impressive level of calm." She didn't answer, but her eyes flickered briefly toward him. Cade smiled faintly. "Yeah, thought so." Another announcement echoed through the station, clearer this time, the tone firm and controlled. "All personnel remain in position. Sector scans are ongoing." Cade nodded slowly. "Ongoing," he repeated. "That's a word you use when you don't know how long this is going to take." He shifted his weight slightly, stretching one leg out before pulling it back again. The movement felt louder than it should have, as if the entire station had decided to listen. "All right," he said under his breath. "New plan. We stay exactly where we are, we don't attract attention, and we pretend this is completely normal." He paused. "Which, to be fair, is already falling apart." The girl leaned just slightly closer again. Cade didn't look at her immediately, but he noticed. "You're doing that on purpose," he said quietly. No response. "Yeah," he nodded. "Thought so." A pair of guards moved past them, close enough now that Cade could see the fine details of their armor. The symbols etched into the surface weren't just decoration. They carried a kind of weight, a presence that made the air feel heavier. Cade kept his gaze forward, resisting the urge to stare. Don't look directly at them, he whispered. That's Rule 2 of spaceports. Rule 1 was about shouting. This one's about not making eye contact with people who look like they don't need permission to ruin your day. The girl remained still, perfectly still. The guards passed without slowing. Cade exhaled quietly. See, he murmured, professional avoidance. Very effective. For a moment it seemed like the tension might settle. The drones continued their patterns, the guards maintained their positions, and the station's noise began to creep back in, hesitant but persistent. Then one of the drones stopped, not near them, but close enough. Its scanning light lingered on a nearby group, then shifted slightly, closer. Cade's shoulders tensed just a fraction. All right, he whispered. This is where things get interesting. The light swept past him once, then returned, paused. Cade smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Of course, he said softly. Why wouldn't it? He resisted the urge to move. Beside him, the girl remained calm, unchanged, as if the drone's attention meant nothing at all. Cade glanced at her quickly, then back at the drone. You're not even a little concerned, he murmured. Her gaze stayed forward, steady. Cade let out a slow breath. Right, he said, following your lead. The drone's light shifted again, scanning more precisely now, its sensors adjusting. Cade leaned his head back against the wall, forcing himself to relax. You know, he said quietly, if this ends with me being escorted somewhere official, I just want it on record that I was very polite about the whole situation. For a brief moment, the girl's expression changed. Not much, just enough. Cade caught it. Was that amusement? He asked, a hint of disbelief in his voice. At a time like this? She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. The drone moved on, just like that. Cade blinked, watching it glide away as if it had never paused at all. Huh, he said. He turned his head slowly toward the girl. She was already looking at him, calm, certain. Cade let out a quiet, almost incredulous laugh. Okay, he said, shaking his head slightly. I'm officially out of my depth. He leaned back again, folding his arms loosely. But you told me to stay, he added, so I'm staying. The girl's gaze softened just slightly, and for the first time since the lockdown began, Cade felt something shift. Not in the station, not in the guards or the drones, but here, in this small space between them. Not tension, not uncertainty. Something quieter, something deliberate. Cade exhaled slowly, his eyes drifting back toward the corridor where the guards still moved with silent precision. All right, he murmured. Let's see how this plays out. The station did not get louder. It got quieter, not in sound but in intention. Conversations faded into careful murmurs. Footsteps softened, and even the restless movement of travelers slowed, as if the entire structure had agreed, without speaking, that something significant was about to happen. Cade noticed it immediately. Ah, he whispered, barely moving his lips. This is the part where everyone pretends they're not paying attention, while absolutely paying attention. The girl beside him remained still, but her stillness had changed again. Not relaxed, not neutral, focused. Cade followed her gaze toward the main corridor. And then he saw why. The guards were no longer searching, they were aligning, not rushing, not calling out orders, just moving into position with a precision that made it clear this was not uncertainty anymore. This was preparation, the kind that came right before something important stepped into view. Cade leaned back slightly, as if that might make him less noticeable. Okay, he murmured. That's never for nothing. People don't stand like that unless they expect someone who makes standing straight feel like a survival instinct. A faint vibration passed through the floor beneath them, subtle but unmistakable. Not from engines, not from machinery, from something docking. Cade exhaled slowly. And there it is, he said, the dramatic entrance. The large doors at the far end of the terminal opened without sound. No rush of air, no mechanical grind. Just a smooth, controlled separation, like the station itself knew better than to interrupt. The first thing that entered was silence. The second was presence. Cade didn't need to see her clearly yet to understand. Right, he whispered. That's definitely someone important. A figure stepped forward, flanked by guards who did not lead, did not follow, but existed around her like extensions of her will. Her movement was measured, unhurried, each step deliberate without effort. She did not look around immediately. She did not need to. The station adjusted to her. Cade swallowed once, his usual commentary pausing just long enough to acknowledge that this was not a situation he could joke his way through easily. Well, he said quietly, I'm either about to witness something historic or become part of a report I don't want to be in. Beside him, the girl shifted, not away, closer, just enough that her shoulder now touched his. Cade felt it, and for a moment, that small contact grounded him more than anything else in the room. Okay, he whispered, softer now. I'm staying. I got the message. The figure in the corridor stopped, not randomly, precisely. Her gaze lifted, and even from this distance, Cade felt it land. Not on the crowd, not on the guards, on them. Cade blinked once, then let out a very quiet breath. Ah, he murmured, that's not ideal. The girl did not look away. She did not hide. She simply watched. The figure began walking again, her path now direct, straight toward them. Cade's mind raced briefly through several possible reactions. Standing up, running, pretending to be asleep, inventing a new identity, but none of them seemed particularly effective. So he stayed. Right, he said under his breath. We're committing to this. No sudden movements, no dramatic speeches, just existing very calmly. The guards parted as the figure approached, creating a clear path that felt less like an invitation and more like inevitability. Cade could see her clearly now. Her features were striking, not because they demanded attention, but because they held it effortlessly. Her long ears mirrored the girl's, though sharper in presence, marked by subtle adornments that suggested rank rather than decoration. Her expression was composed, unreadable at first glance, but there was something beneath it, something controlled, something vast. Cade straightened slightly without meaning to. Yep, he whispered, that's definitely royalty. The girl beside him leaned lightly against his shoulder, not out of fear, out of certainty. Cade felt that too, and for reasons he couldn't fully explain, it steadied him. The figure stopped in front of them. Silence followed, not empty, heavy. Cade looked up slowly. Their eyes met, and for the first time since this entire situation began, Cade didn't have a joke ready. Hello, he said carefully. It felt insufficient. It probably was. The woman's gaze did not shift, not immediately. Instead, she looked at the girl, still leaning against Cade, still calm, still exactly where she had chosen to be. Something in the woman's expression changed then. Not much, but enough. Recognition, relief, something deeper, carefully contained. She stepped closer. The guards behind her remained perfectly still. Cade stayed where he was, resisting every instinct that suggested he should move, speak, or somehow apologize for existing. The girl finally moved. She lifted her head slightly, her gaze meeting the woman's without hesitation. For a brief moment, the entire station seemed to disappear. No noise, no movement, just that quiet connection. Then gently the woman reached out. The girl did not pull away. Cade watched, his expression softening despite himself. Okay, he murmured quietly. That explains a lot. The woman's eyes shifted back to him, and this time Cade held the gaze. Not challenging, not afraid, just present. He gave a small, almost awkward nod. I, shared my lunch, he said, in case that's relevant. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then, the faintest shift in her expression, not quite a smile, but close enough that Cade noticed. Good, she said. Her voice was calm, measured, and carried more weight than the entire station combined. Cade blinked, then nodded again. All right, he said quietly. Good is good. The girl remained beside him for one more moment. Then slowly, she straightened. But she didn't move far. Not yet. And Cade, for reasons he didn't question, didn't move either. For a moment, nothing moved. Cade became very aware of his breathing, of the faint hum of the station returning in careful layers, of the fact that he was still sitting on a cold floor beside someone who was very clearly not just someone. The girl, Ines, shifted her weight slightly, her shoulder brushing his one last time before she stood. The movement was unhurried, natural, like she had already decided how this moment would end, long before it began. Cade looked up at her. "Well," he said quietly, "this is where you dramatically reveal you were important all along, right?" Inez didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either. She turned toward the woman, toward her mother. Cade followed her movement with his eyes, then looked back at the queen, because there was no question now. Everything about her presence made the word feel small, like it didn't fully capture what she was. Queen Thesra. He didn't know how he knew the name, but it fit. The queen's gaze softened, barely, as Inez stepped closer. No rush, no desperate embrace, just a quiet certainty that distance had never truly existed between them. Cade exhaled slowly. "All right," he murmured under his breath. "That's definitely a reunion. Very composed, very royal, no dramatic running. I feel like I've been misled by every story I've ever heard." Inez glanced back at him, just once. It was a small look, but it held something new, something clearer than before. Recognition, perhaps, or acknowledgement. Cade raised a hand slightly. "Hey," he said, "no pressure, but if you ever decide to talk more than one word at a time, I feel like you've got a lot of potential." For the first time, Inez allowed the faintest, unmistakable smile. Then she turned fully to her mother. Queen Thesra placed a hand lightly against Inez's shoulder. The gesture was simple, but it carried a weight Cade couldn't quite explain. Something protective, something grounding, something that said the search had never been uncertain, only delayed. The queen's attention returned to Cade. He met her gaze again, a little more steadily this time. Not because he wasn't aware of who she was, but because something about the situation had shifted. The tension had drained, leaving something quieter behind. "Hi," he said again, because apparently that was all he had. A pause, then, "Still, Cade," he added, as if that clarified anything. The queen studied him for a long moment, not assessing, not judging, observing. Cade resisted the urge to explain himself further. He had the distinct feeling that over-explaining in this moment would somehow make things worse. Finally, the queen spoke. "You remained." Cade blinked once. "Yes," he said. "I was, advised to." A brief glance passed between mother and daughter. Cade cleared his throat. "Also," he added, "I didn't really have a better plan." For a fraction of a second, something almost like amusement touched the queen's expression. Almost. "That was wise," she said. Cade nodded slowly. "I'm going to remember that," he replied. "I don't get called wise often. Usually it's something else." Inez stepped slightly closer to her mother, but her attention drifted back to Cade again. Cade noticed. "Hey," he said softly, "you still owe me half a ration pack." A pause. Then very quietly, Inez spoke. "Later." Cade smiled. "Fair enough." The station began to breathe again around them. The guards shifted, their formation loosening, the drones adjusting their patterns. The lockdown wasn't over yet, but it was resolving. Cade pushed himself up from the floor, brushing off his jacket. "Well," he said, glancing around, "this has been the most interesting delay I've ever had." He looked back at the queen. "I assume I'm not in trouble." The queen regarded him calmly. "No." Cade exhaled. "Good," he said. "That would have been a very awkward ending." He hesitated for a moment, then gestured lightly toward Inez. "She was fine, by the way. Didn't cause any chaos. Very well behaved. Slightly intimidating, but in a good way." The queen inclined her head slightly. "She chose well." Cade blinked. "I'm going to pretend that includes me," he said. Another almost smile. It was brief, but it was real. Inez stepped forward again, just enough to close the small distance between them and Cade. She looked up at him, her expression calm, but no longer distant. For a second, Cade thought she might say something more. Instead, she reached out and pressed the neatly folded wrapper from the ration pack into his hand. He looked down at it, then back at her. "You kept it," he said. She nodded once. Cade smiled, softer this time. "Yeah," he said. "That tracks." She stepped back, returning to her mother's side. The moment settled. Not dramatic, not loud, just complete. Cade slipped the wrapper into his pocket without thinking too much about why. The Queen turned slightly, her presence already shifting away as the guards adjusted around her. Inez followed, but just before they moved fully into the corridor, she looked back one last time. Cade lifted his hand in a small, casual wave. "Safe travels," he said. She held his gaze for a brief second. Then she was gone. The station noise returned fully, like nothing had happened. Cade stood there for a moment longer, staring at the empty space where they had been. "Huh," he said quietly. A new announcement echoed overhead. "Transit operations resuming." Cade let out a small laugh, shaking his head. "Of course," he muttered. "Now you're on time." He adjusted his bag over his shoulder and started walking back toward his gate. Halfway there, he paused, reaching into his pocket and pulling out the folded wrapper. He looked at it for a moment, then smiled. "All right," he said softly. "Maybe delays aren't the worst thing." He slipped it back into his pocket and continued on, his steps a little lighter than before. And for once, when the departure board changed, he didn't mind waiting.